Hello and welcome back into the Fantasy Sanctuary Best Ball Show. As you can see, I'm joined by Pat Kerrane of Legendary Upside, formerly of Rotoworld. You know him from Ship Chasing and the many other streams he's popping up on left, right, and center. You'll also know him as the man who took down Best Ball Mania 3 after a very elongated sweat. How's this off-season treating you, Pat?
Yeah, it's been a good off-season. Appreciate it. It's been fun to launch Legendary Upside, and it's been really cool. Got a Discord going. Had some community help getting the Discord looking good and doing some cool stuff in there. And yeah, just kind of have a little bit more freedom to do whatever content that I want to do. Deep dive stuff, research-based stuff, best ball rankings, all that kind of good stuff.
I think a lot of people kind of think that if they took down one of these big best ball contests, the first thing that they'd be doing is relaxing a little more. But being a subscriber at Legendary Upside, to me, it feels like you're as busy as ever. Are you feeling like more pressure because you're your own boss? Or is it that kind of, okay, well, I have freedom to write about everything, but actually I want to write about everything right now?
Yeah, it has been kind of interesting because I have taken on, a fair amount with launching the site, but it's been really fun. I mean, I was like incredibly fortunate because I won this tournament, but I was also already full-time in the industry. And so then to me, it didn't become about having to make like a major switch in terms of like the type of stuff I was doing in terms of work. It was about like kind of dialing it in. And that's what I've done with the new site. But there is like some admin stuff and things that, keep me busy. We're doing this like various promos, and some of that requires admin and that type of thing. And just like I built this site myself, it's like it's built on a template like that. I'm not a coder, so. But there's some things that occasionally pop up with that, and then I'm like, I wish I had more time to write today or whatever. But overall, I do have so much more freedom, so it's been good. And getting a little bit of help behind the scenes with some of the stuff to just like keep me a little bit more flexible so that I can do kind of like long deep dive writing sessions, because I'm kind of a hyper focuser, like I need like 5-hour blocks to get any writing and research done. So that's been like a little bit something I'm trying to manage with the new venture, but it's actually coming along pretty well.
I think, yeah, I can relate to that. I find once you finally get the idea for the article and you crack the back of it, I find it hard to stop typing, as anyone who's edited my work will attest to. With all that going on, have you managed to get in as many drafts as you'd hoped to by this point in the year?
Yeah, so that's the other thing, right? Is that it's not just like that we have to figure out how to max Best Ball Mania. I mean, that's one thing, right? That's easy. But I mean, 2 years ago, I'm like 150 drafts in a summer. Like, that's a lot. And I'm like, that's no problem at all. But now I've got all these other tournaments. I mean, the Poodle 2 launched today. I triple drafted some of those. I went out in the sun and did 3 drafts at once.
Touch some grass.
Yeah, touch some, not really, but sort of. But yeah, DraftKings has a ton of tournaments. Yeah, it's actually been tough, and I think I've gotten a lot of questions about like bankroll management stuff. I think that's sort of starting to become more of the best ball conversation, because it's like it's kind of hard to not just want to fire at a lot of these. So it's like time management and bankroll management are suddenly becoming a bigger part of the picture this summer, I think.
Definitely. I think the more contests that are kind of being offered, the more we're seeing people who would have only done 10 drafts 2 years ago are suddenly looking, okay, well, what does it look like if I try to get to 100 drafts? What does it look like if I get to 200? How much is that going to cost me? And what should I be doing? And the more that these contests are offered, the better, really, because I think it's particularly these kind of micro ones like the Poodle, like the puppies on Underdog. And that's kind of where DraftKings probably needs to do a little bit more work. Their contest selection seems to be great now, but they seem to be scaling some of these contests so large that nobody feels the rush to get anything in there, which, the $3 20 max tournament has been open for a couple of weeks and there's only 25,000 entries in there. But I mean, when you talk about the $10 contest, I mean, there's more entries in the Draftkings Milly Maker than there is in Best Ball Mania. So it's clear that people are starting to move over to DraftKings a little bit. When you do draft on DraftKings, is there anything in particular that you feel like you have to change up to get in the flow of those drafts?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, the quarterback market is definitely different on DraftKings, and I think I'm more inclined to just go ahead and get an elite quarterback on DraftKings as opposed to, and I've been doing more of it on Underdog, and prices are actually coming down on the top guys on Underdog. So, that's kind of its own interesting conversation over there. But I've been like straight up locked out at quarterback on DraftKings. Like you can get to a point where I'm like, I guess I'm taking like Howell and Trey Lance because like I have like Goff. like that's like the 16th round and like I have Goff. Like stuff like that isn't gonna happen unless you're just like really pushing it and trying to like almost prove a point on Underdog. It's not gonna happen to you. But on DraftKings, people will auto draft. There might be a couple auto drafters who are just like scooping up 4 quarterbacks each or whatever. And so I think you need to be a lot more just aware and focused on quarterback and making sure like you're not going to have to do some crazy reach late in the draft or in the middle of the draft at quarterback. I think also just in general, the ADP is just way less sharp, I think, than Underdog. There's kind of more values throughout the draft that you can kind of build into your teams. As a result, I think I'm also a little bit more willing to go, I guess what I would say is more extreme. Like I found myself going zero running back, like true zero running back more on DraftKings, but I've also found myself breaking ties at points towards running backs on DraftKings early, because I'm like, I'll find a wide receiver that I like later, where like let's say in round 4 or round 5 on Underdog, if I need a receiver, I'm not really thinking about it. I'm like, I'm taking the receiver. This is my chance. They're not going to be around later. But on DraftKings, I'm willing to push things a little bit more and say, hey, what if I go elite quarterback, elite tight end, 2 running backs, and maybe I'll take that running back falling value in round 8 where normally I wouldn't have. Or not.
Yeah, I think kind of to your point, like about how the ADP is a little softer and stuff, and the drafts are a little bit softer. It feels like you can push structures a little bit more on DraftKings because there's so many people who aren't doing anything close to a structure that it's like, okay, well, I wouldn't normally do this, but I'll take that because I know that this drafter is just going to balls up a decent amount of their picks from here on in. One of my favorite articles that you posted this year was about the benefits of elite tight ends and how they supercharge so many different micro strategies. And the article, which I'd urge everyone to go and read, is fantastic. There's loads of great data in it. But one of the key points about how many micro strategies perform better, I wanted to kind of just pull it side by side and really compare. These were the best possible versions of Hero RB, Zero RB, Dual RB, and even the dreaded Robust RB. And to your point, you talked about how tight ends dragged those along, and we could see like your winning lineup was a Dual RB team, wasn't it? And that had an advance rate on Underdog of 14.2%, so below average. But when you threw in that elite tight end, it actually increased it. And it was the most surprising thing, and we kind of talked about it briefly just before we got started, was even Robust RB, a strategy which, most of us wouldn't touch with a stick, was even advancing at an above average rate when you put in that elite tight end before round 3.
Yeah, which is interesting. I guess this is going to be driven a lot by Kelsey. Kelsey, what it would have been Kelsey, Andrews, and maybe a little Pitts was the guys driving this. So yeah. But in the article, I mentioned that, the fact that it was just Kelsey last year has led people to think, I think largely the conversation has been basically like, you either want Kelsey or you don't want one of these elites. You like, sure, take Kelsey if you want to take Kelsey, but then you got to punt because these other guys aren't going to have great advance rates. A lot of them are going to bust. But like a lot of them busted last year, and Kittle was still on my winning team. He was on a number of other winning teams in these tournament structures. He was also on the drafters winning lineup, which is weeks 1 through 17, which I think has been like a little bit undercovered. The fact that was-not a Kelsey team, that was a Kittle team. The fact that Kittle had 3 spike weeks last year, 3 weeks above of 20 half-point PPR points or better. He had 3 of those last year. 2 of them happened to come in the playoffs, weeks 15 and 16. That's absolutely massive. That's also descriptive. We can't expect, it's not like tight ends just do better in week 15 and 16. That's not, that's luck. That's luck that happened. But Madison Parkhill's pointed out that in these tournament structures, there's a higher chance than you'd think of one of these elite tight ends doing something like that in a given year, because there's 3 consecutive single week tournaments that you're trying to win. And these elite tight ends capture a massive share kind of year in and year out of the available spike weeks at the position. So last year, as I said, Kittle had 3 of these weeks, Kelsey had 3, and Andrews had 3. There were only 22 weeks total of 20 plus half point PPR points at the tight end position. Hawkinson had another 2 of them. So those top 3 guys who were drafted as elite guys, they had 41% of all the available spike weeks at the position. Hawkinson comes in as an early tight end. He was going ahead of the 10th round. He wasn't an elite tight end in terms of his draft position, but still drafted early. Half the weeks now going to those guys. And honestly, the fact that you didn't have to compete with Pitts is great for you as an Andrews drafter, great for you as a Kelsey or Kittle drafter. You're only drafting one of these guys anyway. So if you're kind of overweight, Kittle, Waller, and Pitts, and 2 of them completely bust, that's obviously not great for those teams, but it's great for those Kittle teams, especially when he actually does go off. So I think that it's one of those structures that you should probably think about, even though it helped advance rates with Kelsey here. I wouldn't do it to try to boost your advance rates necessarily. I would think of it more as a playoff structure. I'm banking on one of these elite guys to help me, to basically, go off at the exact right time. But they're just so much more likely to do that than some random tight end that you grab later. I mean, that guy does have a chance of having a touchdown in the right week, a couple touchdowns in the right week. But their chance of going off over a multi-week stretch, just given what we've seen historically, is not nearly as high as those elites.
Yeah, and as Chuck says in the comments, most Kittle owners were in prison before week 15 for violent crime, so their earnings were probably seized by the government. So it was rough for Kittle, and those spike weeks, they kind of came against 2 of them were against the Cardinals, 1 against the Seahawks, and if you were doing DFS, those were smash plays for tight ends quite often through the season. So it's tricky kind of guessing how sticky that could be for this year. Just picking up on kind of what you were saying about tight ends as well, if we're talking about DraftKings specifically, last year, there were 11 tight end performances over 100 yards, and the only one of them that came from outside the top 100 picks was Evan Ingram. So when you're thinking about DraftKings and obviously those players that can pick up the 100-yard bonus, do you weigh that at all in terms of tight end, or are you just looking for the volume monsters?
Yeah, I don't think I'm looking too different across the platforms, because my thing with tight end is that I think the reason why this is the case, that these elite tight ends are operating at kind of a different, they're able to deliver something that the rest of the position isn't able to deliver, is because they are literally different players, different positions. Mark Andrews is a number 1 receiver on his own team. Travis Kelsey is the number 1 receiver on his own team. That rarely happens at the tight end position, and it happens not because they need that guy to step up. It happened because those guys are freaky humans, and there's only so many people like that on the planet. I just pulled up ESPN's open score. Mark Andrews had an 86 in that, which is really good. Travis Kelsey was 2nd. George Kittle was 3rd at the tight end position. So it's not this isn't an accident. These guys are getting open like wide receivers. I mean, Jerry Jeudy had an open score of 80. Garrett Wilson was at 77, which is close to where Kelsey was. So you have a few tight ends who play the position and can run routes like a wide receiver. There's only a handful of them. Really, at any point in the NFL, there's probably only a half dozen of those guys at most, and likely just maybe more 3 to 4. And so it's less about the scoring settings and more just about how many people on earth can block a defensive end or whatever, and then also run routes as good as a wide receiver. There's not many.
And we'll get one more tight end question before we jump into a draft. But when you're drafting on DraftKings, what's your kind of thoughts on, do you ever go past 3 tight ends? And looking at the data for the final of Milly Maker last year, the average build had 3.1 tight ends on. So out of a field of 989 people, there was a lot of people who were going to 4 tight ends. I don't know how much that helped them in the end or hindered them when they eventually got to the final. But is that something you'd be tempted to do if you were punting the position completely, or do you just feel like a onesie position 3 is the most you can get to?
I actually haven't done a ton of 4, but I don't, in a 20-round draft where, if you were to hit on someone that was low owned and low, not drafted, to help get you there, they'll be huge. And then this Milly final is big. Like if you happen to have
1,400 people this year.
Yeah. Really, if you have any 20th round pick who hits your lineup, it's going to be huge. So I don't think it's bad. I think that if you're going to do it, this is probably the time of year to do it, because when we try to figure out who else to take in these rounds, it gets pretty difficult. Like we're gonna hit on a lot of dead roster spots right now, and that's something that Mike Leone showed in his Best Ball Manifesto research, that if you draft in May, you're gonna, on average, have a lot more dead roster spots. You do have a higher chance of hitting like the absolute nuts in terms of, just drafting guys who both stay healthy and then, were impossible to pair together later in the draft season when their ADPs were higher. And so there's some advantages to drafting this time of year. But his research showed that those dead roster spots really do hurt you. And I think the bigger that final gets, the more it really probably hurts you. So.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're going to jump in a draft here. Whilst we do that, Pat, do you want to tell people what you've got going on with Legendary Upside and all the various amazing offers you've got going with it?
Yeah, so I've got some pretty cool offers right now. LegendaryUpside.com/early. You can sign up and get $30 off for your first year. So that takes it down to $69 for your first year. And there is a form on the site. So after you sign up, if you go to the site, the main page, there's a perk/Discord page, it's called. There's a form on that page. Also, if you like, just hit me up on Twitter at Pat Kerrane. I'll give you a link to the form, but you got to fill that out, because if you do, I'll be able to send your username over to Underdog, and they can give you a $50 Underdog credit. So that's something that I'm offering right now for as long as I have enough credits. I'm going to burn through those pretty soon. I'm offering the $30 discount through July 18th. I don't think the credits will last through the end of June. So if you're going to sign up, it's a good time to sign up. You can also, if you're interested in draft tools and whatnot, and it looks like you've got some Spike Week tools going right here.
Yep. I had Eric on last week and we talked a lot about them. I think it's, for streaming DraftKings drafts, they're a lifesaver.
They really are. And you can get, with promo code Leg Up, you can get 40% off Spike Week as a Legendary Upside subscriber. So that's another perk I got going.
When you draft with the Spike Week stuff, how much stuff do you tend to display? I tend to be quite minimal. I've got the playoff sort of stuff and my exposures, but I prefer to keep things quite minimal personally.
Yeah, I've experimented with basically having all of it up there, and then I still like starring the guys and putting them in my queue. I think I really like Spike Week lets you see the week 15 and 16 correlations, and then I really like that element because I don't have that all memorized. But I like starring the guys. Yeah, thanks, Joe. So Joey said he signed up. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, we've got a few people in the draft who are recognized. We've got Nobo at the 101. We've got Eagles sitting later on in the draft, who anyone who's done a best ball draft will most likely have come across him. We've got Michael Heary at the 12, who does a lot of great data visualization for Established to Run. So we're picking at 6. Any kind of early leans on where you've been going with these middle picks so far, Pat? Are you drafting more running backs this year, or are you staying true to those kind of zero RB routes?
I mean, you got to let the draft fall to you, man. I think here, I mean, this is about how I'd have it. I like Kelsey a lot if he falls. I like Bijan. Basically, this top, so we're 6. So we'll get one of these 3. Yeah, this is how I would have it. Bijan's my 7. I would go probably Kupp and Hill ahead of Kelsey.
Yeah, for me, I've got a lot of cup so far. I haven't fallen in Tyreek simply because I've just been taking a lot of cup because I feel like there's a better chance he jumps higher in ADP at the minute. But I'm definitely not against Tyreek and pretty much anyone who goes here. I'll let you make the call on what we go with the first pick and then see how the draft comes back to us. So Cup does go. So we could go Kelsey, Tyreek Hill, or Bijan.
Let's go Tyreek Hill.
Lovely stuff. Cool. So
there's enough people in here that Eagles is in here too. Yeah, this isn't like, I don't think we got much like, DraftKings softness. We didn't get the softness, it looks like. This looks like an underdog draft to me.
We should be all right. I feel like I recognize Brad 1892 as well. Definitely a few names that are coming up, but I don't think we've got a full ship chasing style piss yellow draft either.
Yeah.
So you're heading over to another stream after this, is that right?
Well, ship chasing tonight.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So far through the first round, it's kind of been Austin Eckler was hovering around that back of the first round. Do you think now that he's kind of signed a slightly improved contract, we're going to see him creep up to Bijan Robinson a bit more and those two really be kind of flip-flopping at times with some people preferring Eckler?
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I suppose you're right. Eckler was on my team last year, and so I do have a soft spot for Eckler, but I was kind of nervous about taking him where he was going. I wasn't really that into it because he's 28 years old. He's always kind of like, it's always a little precarious with the touchdowns with him. Like if they were to bring in anybody, and they've tried, they've tried to Spiller and Joshua Kelly and
Austin Eckler's begged for somebody else to take some touches.
Yeah, so I just think like it's sort of a fragile situation. It's like he's a smaller back, and it's sort of the perfect thing. And if that thing were to get disrupted, then he's more of like a third or fourth round value, And what I mean by that is if he's not getting like workhorse usage, I mean he is kind of essentially like a satellite back who is operating as a 1A, So I was nervous when this contract stuff was going down. Now that it's resolved, I'm like, okay, I'm good with him, but kind of where he was going. I still am like not. If he's going to go where Bijan's going, I think I'm going to be fading him again. He's 28 years old, and his rushing efficiency stuff wasn't great last year. Obviously, he's an incredible receiving back.
So, Pat, after you said that, we might not get any kind of craziness in there, we saw one guy take both Jalen Hurts and Mahomes from the 11th pick.
I told you, man, the quarterback market's different over here.
There's no party like a DraftKings party. It's you got to be paying attention, and that's definitely one of the benefits of seeing the draft board. It seems like DraftKings are going to launch their own version of the draft board. There's a few pictures of them creeping around on Twitter from when they've just put them live temporarily, so hopefully that's there soon. But it's amazing how much you don't pay attention to the room sometimes. So we're back up. There's Garrett Wilson's at the top of ADP. We could take Jalen Waddle for the double Miami stack.
Let's do it. Let's go double Miami.
Lovely. And Eric and Rob had a great show last week over on Spike Week talking about how many people weren't actually double tapping their quarterbacks, double stacking their quarterbacks, but it was far lower than people would expect. So I'm definitely in on that. And of course, you wrote a great article talking about, snipe me on my quarterback. I dare you.
I did almost call it that. And then I was like, I don't dare you, though. I don't want to.
That definitely felt like it was in the byline or so.
Yeah. It was the subtext was I dare you, but I didn't want to write the words I dare you. Because I did actually have, I did today, I'm in one of the Bulldogs on Underdog. I took DJ Moore in the late fourth, looking at the back half of the board, and they all had, a lot of them had elite quarterbacks or really needed wide receivers. And I was like, I'm going to get Fields. Fields had already fallen to me, but instead of scooping the value, I wanted to push him back around. So I was like, I'll take DJ Moore. If I have DJ Moore and no Fields, fine. If I have Fields and no DJ Moore, I'm going to be a little bit more bummed about that. And a guy took Mahomes. He had Mahomes, and he took Fields. And so he sniped me. Sniped me hard. It hurt, but you survive. You can survive a quarterback snipe.
So we're back on the clock. We were round 3 pick here. There's Ramondre, Breece Hall, Mark Andrews, which give us that kind of week 17 correlation. I know you're kind of high on him.
Let's do it.
Lamar's already gone. I'm a Ravens fan, and I'll always take Mark Andrews. Quite happy with that. And it feels like, if that's anything like the last time those two teams played, it could be explosive. One of the kind of articles you're well known for writing, and, obviously your new venture has the name Legendary Upside. How many running backs in this kind of round 3 range do you think truly have that kind of legendary upside? Or do you think these are guys who are outside of that zone?
So it's interesting because the guy who most pops for me in that article, and I will be doing that for the new site. You gotta write the article that the site's named after, the new site. And so when I did this analysis, certain things popped up as being really important: receiving ability, receiving efficiency, but also being young. Guys who are going into their second year, that was generally a boost, because that's if you're going to see someone get like used a lot more in the critical areas around the goal line, or as a receiver, you tend to see that kind of shift in their second year, and we tend to over project that kind of shift. Or at least overdraft the hope of that shift for guys later in their career. A lot of teams, they just kind of like treat guys like, this guy is kind of, we know who he is. We're not going to like kind of give him this new role. That's probably more rare than we think. And so that's like, one reason that I'm a little bit nervous about Eckler. It's also one reason that I'm still drafting Breece Hall through the fact that he's coming off a torn ACL, because Hall checks like basically every box that you're looking for. He's a second-year player, highly drafted. He had an amazing rookie season. He was super efficient as a rusher. He had 2.0 yards per route run, which is amazing. He was a great breakaway runner. He's going to get an upgrade in his overall offense. I'm like, just be healthy, man. He's big. They're going to use him around the goal line. Like, they drafted a running back who I like as Abanikanda, but the big knock on him is that he doesn't play through contact well. Like, Breece is going to be the guy around the goal line for sure. So I'm pretty into Breece. I draft him a lot.
Yeah, I think he's somebody, it's very easy to see the path to him being solidified in the middle of round 2 in a couple of months' time. Like, we saw videos of him at OTA yesterday running around. He wasn't running at full speed, but the big difference between Breece Hall's ACL injury and the difference between somebody like J.K. Dobbins and Javonte Williams is it's just an ACL. It was a clean issue. And of course,
he almost got back to us.
Yeah.
I would have shut up.
I really hoping he was going to finish. So top of ADP, we've got Jahmyr Gibbs, DeAndre Hopkins, Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, Mike Williams further down, or Jerry Jeudy. Anybody particularly stand out to you, Pat?
I mean, Gibbs is fine. I don't think I'm going to get over that Breece snipe for a while.
Let's go with Gibbs. I quite like.
What team took him?
Let's put it up. So that was Lazy Scores.
Running back.
Oh yeah.
Come on.
Well, yeah. I was trying not to jinx it by mentioning that he was.
I didn't even notice
board, but
right after I finished that whole spiel, I was like, "Wait, did Breece not go? What have I done?"
Just one of those. But yeah, how do you feel about Jahmyr Gibbs for this season? Do you think that he really has the potential to be a top 12 player?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was an awesome prospect. He's undersized, which is the big knock. I think it's a legit knock. And I think that the Lions could maybe bring him along a little slow in terms of like how productive he is for fantasy. But, this tournament, primarily, we need to finish first in week 17. That's the number one thing, right? Like, so you have to get there. You can't like optimize only for week 17. You have to end up getting there in the first place. But, you don't want to sacrifice things that are going to help you score a ton of points in week 17. And behind a really good offensive line, on a pretty good offense, and on a team that utilizes the running back and did some pretty cool stuff with Swift at times. And Swift had, the touches he did get were valuable. So if we get that, plus like they don't hate him, Could be a fun December and January for Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, somebody who drafted a lot of Trey Lance last 2 years. I'm really trying to hone in on players whose coaching staff don't hate them this year. It seems to have been
it is
something
important.
I've gone wrong with in the past. At the top of ADP, we've got Mike Williams and then Jerry Jeudy, then kind of a few running backs, Drake London, J.K. Dobbins, if we want to build out that week 17 correlation.
I think we need a receiver here, so I'm good with Williams or London or whoever, but
we'll go with Drake
one of those
London.
two.
I've found myself drafting a decent amount of Drake London this offseason. I feel like the Falcons are going to be fun, even if I don't have a huge amount of faith in Desmond Ridder being particularly fantastic. But I feel like they're set up for a fun season, and it just feels like perhaps now we actually do get the Kyle Pitts breakout finally. Well, obviously he had a great rookie season, but now maybe we'll get one where he scores more than one touchdown.
I know I've drafted a ton of Kyle Pitts right now. Like he's in the sixth, like basically every draft, and I don't
it's
really
that whole post-hype sort of thing where it's like, okay, well, what's changed? I mean, look back at Trevor Lawrence last year, and it was coming off after years of people talking him up, and he comes in, and then all of a sudden he has that season, which wasn't through his own fault. It was coaching stuff and bits like that. But his ADP just falls and everybody decides his situation is worse. And then in the end, everybody's sort of sitting around in November going, how did we let this happen? And I'm definitely in on Kyle Pitts, probably not for this build. I don't know how you feel about double tight end builds. It's not something I tend to do unless I'm on FFPC.
I think it's something I've done a little bit in the Poodle on Underdog, where I forget exactly how big that final is, but it's something like, I think it might be 40-ish.
It's quite small, yeah.
So like, okay, I don't need every one of my, like, I can, if I happen to get, a tight end performance who crushes, that could be like the separator. Like just, like if Andrews is like super high owned in the final because he crushed, and Pitts is very underrepresented because no one really has them together, I'm like, well, maybe, I don't need to be as perfect in the final. I think for something like this, like, it's too much. It's too much to spend a third and a sixth round pick in a 1,400 team final. Like, this is too much of your draft capital to realistically take it down, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I think the only way those kind of builds succeed in my mind is if you really hit gold on a later pick, like a double-digit pick, who becomes somebody who's really making up for the fact that you spent that draft capital earlier on. So we've seen the elite tier of quarterbacks all kind of go now. Justin Herbert went a few picks before our last one, so it feels like we're probably keeping an eye towards where Tua is. He goes at pick 93 over here, so we're a little way away from that. But at the top of the board, there is Trevor Lawrence. He's been sliding a little bit in some of these drafts. Not uncommon to see him go into the mid-60s. Dalvin Cook, who nobody seems to know what he's doing. I know you're a Kadarius Toney kind of guy, Pat. We've got Pacheco there, Cam Akers, Brandon Ayuk, Rashad White, and Darren Waller, George Pickens. Any of those kind of guys, particularly who you've been finding yourself drafting a lot of?
Yeah, I think there's a cheat code, which I'll mention after this guy who's already sniped us once. You won't snipe us again. I mean, you might snipe us again, but...
Okay, so he took Kyle Pitts.
So to me, Jackson Smith and Jigba is kind of a cheat code on DraftKings. You can just sit back and get them in the 6th round, even the 7th round. But this room's got enough sharp people in it where I don't want to try to pull that off. And we could use the receiver. I think it's a good pick for us.
No, I love that. I've been taking a lot of Jackson Smith and Jigba because I'm over here in the UK. We can't access Underdog, so I'm locked out of that. And everybody seems to be talking about how Jackson Smith and Jigba was going too high, but I'm just sitting over here on DraftKings, just, gobbling it up at sort of, in round 6, because although I fully get the talk about, okay, well, the Seahawks might not play a lot of free wide receiver sets, I feel like Jackson Smith and Jigba is so good and so good at commanding targets that by the time we get to the weeks which really matter for us in best ball, that I'm absolutely going to want the kind of volume that he could be getting. Part of me just thinks, are we that certain that Jackson Smith and Jigba just isn't a better receiver than either Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf? And I love both those players, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibilities that he just dominates in a way that sees him have to get on the field.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think it seems. I mean, Lockett and Metcalf are both so good that seems like ludicrous to be like, what if Jackson Smith and Jigba is able to force his way on the field? But I don't think it's ludicrous. I mean, this guy was competing right there with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, who are both stars, and he was doing it while he was 2 years younger in the program than Chris Olave, a year behind Garrett Wilson. We just have the 1 year with Smith and Jigba, so he's a little bit of a volatile projection, but like that volatility goes both ways. Like either he's kind of a mirage or he's awesome is kind of how I'm thinking about it. So the other thing about him is that he's going to get open quickly, and Geno Smith is really accurate to the short area of the field, and he likes getting the ball out quickly. So I think Geno Smith and him could really pair super well together. He could be a real target hog down the stretch. So getting him, he's one of those things where like he should be more expensive on DraftKings than on Underdog, and he's like 2 rounds cheaper on DraftKings than Underdog. I think the Underdog price will come down, but I think he's kind of a cheat code on DraftKings right now.
Yeah, so far we've just got the one running back and Jahmyr Gibbs. There is a couple of players. There's James Conner, who I've been finding myself taking a lot of. It feels like he's got a clear path to a big workload. David Montgomery, if you believed in handcuffs, it's not something I'd be doing with early picks. Marquise Brown's a little further down. I feel like there's a good path to him going up in drafts. Anyone you want to take here, Pat?
I'd say one of the Steelers guys, the wide receivers, and just get the 5th, and we can be done for a while.
I'm going to go with Deontay Johnson because personally, that's my lean. I feel like, George Pickens is fantastic, but I feel like what Deontay Johnson does in terms of earning targets and stuff, I've just got a little bit more of a bias towards him. But yeah, and we got that nice little correlation between the Steelers and the Seahawks for Week 17. Right.
I like Deontay Johnson better than Pickens as well. I was hoping
that's music to my ears. I think it's just tricky with Pickens because he's got such a cult following because he's clearly such a dog. But it's what we've seen so far is big plays rather than big points. And even though Deontay Johnson was absurdly inefficient last year, he still earned those targets at a really high rate, and that feels like something that's going to be transferable to this year. So I'm completely fine with that. So just taking a quick glance at some of these teams. So outside of the team that started Hurts and Mahomes, there's nothing too crazy on here. A lot of teams that are quite nicely built. You've got Michael on the end, who started off with kind of 0 RB build, Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Debo, TJ Hawkinson, Damian Pierce, Jordan Addison. Any other teams kind of stand out as teams that you really like through this 7th round?
Yeah, the guy that sniped his own Brees has continued to build well, which I'm annoyed by. Normally, you can count on, a 4th running back too early, and then you're like, well, at least the team's dead. But I don't think it's dead. Come on, man. Stop drafting well.
So when it comes back round to us, we're kind of getting into that range where we might want to consider what we want to do positionally. We've only got the one running back, but I feel like on DraftKings at the minute, there's plenty of guys from round 10 onwards. There's a nice little spell of them where it's all right. Getting those 5 wide receivers is something that I always try and make sure I've done by the 10th round. It feels like otherwise you're just absolutely chasing yourself to not have it. Is that something that you feel like translates to DraftKings as well as Underdog, or do you feel like even stronger over here you want to be on it?
Yeah, I mean, given the scoring settings, you'd want to be prioritizing it more, but I don't think you have to as much because you can kind of dig out later. Like I'm in one of the DraftKings 555s, which are sharper groups. It's kind of like this, and it's like I kind of like pushed it probably a little too much. I had 4 wide receivers through 7, but then I didn't get my 5th until later on, and I was starting to get a little bit nervous about it. But the ADP, I think, still helps you out on DraftKings, where you can get some of the guys that are kind of more like all going in like the 12th, 13th, 14th range. They're like a little more spread out on DraftKings, and so you can just get like professional wide receivers with jobs. And you can tack on like several of them to help ease, to help kind of dig you out of just not being a strong wide receiver early. Where on Underdog, like those guys get snapped up as well, so you kind of can't recover on Underdog. Is my view on it.
Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. So we're one pick away now. Anthony Richardson sitting at 92 overall in ADP. It does feel like he's receded slightly from where he was, but Tua, we're a couple of picks ahead of his ADP, but that seems like a smash pick for me.
I think we grab Tua. Yeah, let's do that.
That's nice.
We got the double stack with the Andrews bring back. I mean, we don't have to get too cute.
That's it. So you can see over here on the right of the screen, we've got our Week 17 playoffs. We've got Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Mark Andrews, and then the Jackson Smith and Jigba, Deontay Johnson. So we're definitely heading that way. I mean, your team is definitely one BBM 3 was one that was definitely built for Week 17. Do you feel like draft rooms now are just so much more gearing towards that, or do you still see a lot of people, do you think, who just aren't aware of the weight in that Week 17?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I do think people are building it in. I guess I'm not like necessarily looking at all the other teams just to see how much they're doing it, because it's sort of like right now we're in an area where I don't think people are getting in each other's way with it too much. I do think that like down the line, maybe that will start to happen. If you're trying to build stacks without the quarterback, for example, that's going to screw up the guy who has the quarterback. So, but right now, I think it seems like most people are kind of just building in more traditional, like I want to stack my quarterback and add a bring back. I think the big thing is like there are ways to do it without really sacrificing advance rate stuff, without reaching a lot. I mean, look at this. Like we took Tyreek, Waddle, Mark Andrews, and Tua, but we didn't reach really for anybody.
Couple of picks at the absolute most. Yeah, it was very organic, that one. So we've been kind of avoiding the running back position so far. Are there any of these kind of names that particularly stand out for you? I've been drafting quite a bit of Samaje Perine, but he's kind of jumped quite a little bit lately. Devin A-Chain would fit the build if we wanted to really hammer that. We've also got, Rashad Penny, who could have a big role in Philadelphia. Anybody kind of standing out for you?
I'm good with any of these guys. Perine would be fine. I mean, that he's the type of dude we kind of need. Brian Robinson would be fine. I would say one of those two or Dylan probably fits the build the best, because I'm not sure how much we're going to get out of Gibbs early.
Yeah, I'd take Perine because I really like pairing him with Gibbs for the reasons you kind of talked about. I think, Perine feels like a lock to open the season with a decent amount of volume. Even if Javonte Williams does come back, then Perine should have a good spell where he's going to be the lead back and he can kind of help make up for the fact that Jahmyr Gibbs might be in a bit of a timeshare to open the season. Is that something that you kind of weigh up quite a lot, stuff like that? I mean, last year it seemed like DeAndre Hopkins was one of those players that you could really pair with somebody who could get out to a strong start.
Yeah, Peter Overzet's talked about this a fair amount with kind of layering your rooms if you're going zero running back. This isn't like a true zero running back builds, but when I take Jahmyr Gibbs as my first running back in like the 4th round, I basically build it like it's a zero running back build. That's one of the reasons I was really wanted to get that 5th wide receiver, because I wanted to be strong at wide receiver. I love that we have an elite tight end, because like I don't know that we're going to get much from our running backs in the early weeks. Gibbs could really not have much of a role. Maybe he'll get some scheme touches and stuff, but he could be someone that's not hitting our starting lineup for the first few weeks for sure, even if he has a really good season. So yeah, I think being able to pick your later running backs with a good idea of what you're going to get from your earlier running backs, is important. If you have Gibbs and then you're like taking a bunch of contingent swings in this range, you could really, really hurt your chances of advancing.
Yeah, definitely. So it's kind of winding back around to us. And Brian Robson, he seems to be falling a little bit in some of these drafts. I've done a couple in the last couple of days and noticed him falling a little. It feels like people are jumping more back onto the Antonio Gibson bandwagon, which makes sense because he sees so much more of the kind of high points touches and the high value ones compared to Brian Robinson. I think he's he could definitely be a lot better coming off an off season where he's not been shot, hopefully. But it just, I don't think he really gave people enough to inspire them to push him up draft boards at the minute. Anyone in particular who's kind of standing out to you? We've got Jamal Williams down here. We've got Khalil Herbert that gives a nice bit of correlation in week 17. Or, we've got...
I kind of like Penny. I still take Penny.
I've been taking a lot of Penny. I'm down with that. I think he's very much a player who can be great, and also gives a little bit of early correlation for week 15 when he gets a revenge game against the Seahawks, which could be fun. I feel like that's one which every DFS column will be writing up. Revenge game, Rashad Penny, if he's healthy, of course.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that.
I mean, this is the stuff you've got to be looking at in May.
yeah. If you're not thinking about the Rashad Penny revenge game on May 24th, what are you doing?
Okay, so Pat Fryermuth went off the board after us. He was somebody that, like, if he'd fallen past ADP, I would have considered possibly for this build. But we're kind of at a point now where we've got a 1-3-5-1, so nothing really feels particularly urgent. We're not really in a position with our team of, we've got Tyreek, Waddle, Drake London, Deontay Johnson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Geno Smith's already off the board. So would you be content putting a second QB on there in terms of Kenny Pickett or Desmond Ridder and calling that good? Or would you be looking at this as a 3 QB build probably?
I think we should probably go 3 QB now.
Yeah.
I think with Tua's like with the double stack, you could probably just do one, because you're like, look, my whole team, literally the first three picks are just a bet on this one game. So, but at the same time, I mean, we know there are the reason that Tua is not going higher is because he could miss some games again. And God, if he were to miss a stretch and we just had Kenny Pickett and then he went off in week 17, that'd be tough for us. It'd be tough.
Yeah, it's not really an area of the draft where there's a lot going on at quarterback. We've got Russell Wilson right there, who I have been taking a little bit of. Kyler Murray, who, if we had more in the way of Arizona players, would make more sense.
So what do we have? We've got 3 running backs now.
So we've got a 1-3-5-1 so far. So we've got Gibbs, we've got P. Ryan, and then we've got Penny. So we could take another in this range. It's a nice area of the draft for running backs. Jamal Williams still there, Elijah Mitchell, Donta Foreman, Raheem Mostert, Kendry Miller. That's kind of getting a little towards.
What's wide receiver look like?
Wide receiver: Tyler Boyd, Jacoby Myers, Rashee Rice, Adam Thielen, Darnell Mooney.
I think we go running back here.
Yeah, Elijah Mitchell, he's at the top, or we could go Donta Foreman, which again gives us a little more correlation. Or
I like Elijah Mitchell a lot.
I like Elijah Mitchell too, and I feel like that's one which, for me, I've got Bijan Robinson as my RB2 at the minute, and I think it's not because I can definitely see the argument why people will push him ahead of Christian McCaffrey if Elijah Mitchell's healthy. But yeah, I think there's a very real chance that Elijah Mitchell could have meaningful games where he sees large amount of touches. We've seen Christian McCaffrey missed plenty of games before. What was your kind of feeling on Elijah Mitchell going into last season, Pat?
I thought he was a bit overpriced. It's kind of that, like, round 6 type of range.
Yeah.
I just had a hard time with him because he is. I mean, I think he's talented, but I think he's sort of limited. He's not going to be kind of a big pass catcher, and certainly not with McCaffrey there now. So, but now, I mean, I think he's talented, and he's on a good offense, and they like to run the ball. So, it's like, I don't want to overthink this stuff too much. Like, I want exposure to guys who think are good on good offenses, and if they're more of a running guy, it's great if their team likes to run the ball. I'm still taking Tyler Algier for the same reason, even though he's definitely going to be a backup now, but I think he's a talented backup. So this range is kind of nice. There's lots of guys like that and kind of that fit that general archetype here.
Yeah, and I think when you can get from a position of kind of weakness at the position where we only had one running back through the first 10 and then suddenly get to a point where now we're at 1-4-5-1. It just opens up the draft board so much more. You're not chasing yourself. You're not worried about being boxed out on certain positions. So at QB, it's Derek Carr, Jordan Love, Matthew Stafford, Bryce Young, Kenny Pickett. We could backdoor something with Matthew Stafford, Tyler Higbee, Van Jefferson, and of course, it's Kenny Pickett who's there. And then further down, Desmond Ridder right at the end. And of course, everyone's favorite late stack of the Patriots. Everybody's desperation stack, as you guys touched on ADP chasing this week. But,
he can always bail you out. Always
that's
bail you.
it.
Well, we don't have a bill, which is unfortunate.
It's the last girl at the dance, and last song's on. Time to find a partner. With 2 away. Okay, so what do you think? We could take Tyler Higbee here if we wanted to see whether Matt Stafford would come back around at 140. His ADP is 146, which you'd probably maybe.
Can I see wide receiver?
Of course, yeah. So Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne.
Is Nico Collins still here?
Yes, Nico Collins is still there at 161.
That's another cheat code on DraftKings. Nico Collins just sitting here for you. You
want
need that wide receiver 6.
You want to take him
I
now?
think we just take him. Yeah, I think we just take him.
Okay, that's
it's way ahead of ADP.
Yeah, but, yeah. Hey, I don't mind
respect.
that.
That's respect to this room.
Yeah, and I think we've been kind of quite sensible with, we've not been reaching on players, so I don't mind taking that. And Collins' ADP at 161 is right next to CJ Stroud, so it kind of becomes quite difficult to take both of them without reaching on one or one of them falling.
Right.
How do you feel about CJ Stroud this season? I know, like, from reading your rookie coverage and stuff, that you definitely thought that he could have a path to being quite good this season.
Yeah, no, I think I'm not as big on Stroud as I was on Young. I like Young a lot more. I like Richardson a lot more for fantasy. But I think Stroud is pretty interesting in best ball because he goes 20 picks after Young. And I don't know that their rookie outlooks are like that different, even though I do like Young more as a prospect. So I really like Nico Collins. I think he's a really good pick. I just checked his underdog ADP. It's at 141. So that's like one of those where I'll be like, I'll sub in the underdog ADP a couple times on a DraftKings board. And it's like, yeah, I'm kind of doing a huge reach, like a 20 pick reach, but I'm only really doing like a 20 pick reach because I recognize a lot of names. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're about to go back up.
Did Pickett go?
Pickett is there. We could take Pickett, so 10 spots ahead of ADP. I'd be completely fine with that. I think that's a good pick there to kind of secure that second QB, because if we miss that, then there we go.
Yeah,
so
is there anyone else on the board that did you take him? Okay. Is there anyone else, though, that's...
Well, we've got CJ Stroud. He could come around, and then, if that happens, that's fine. And then we've got Desmond Ridder, who could round out our QB room later. But, yeah, that's kind of it for me. I mean, I feel like I need to actually have a conversation with myself about Brock Purdy, and finally, maybe I need to take down the Trey Lance jersey off the wall. And
oh no, another Trey Lance bros turns it in. I turned in my card real early.
Yeah, I mean, I held on. I had a lot of him in Dynasty, and I spent most of this offseason trading him away in Dynasty whilst his value was still kind of okay. And thankfully, I managed to pick up Brock Purdy on a huge amount of waivers. So I don't know. It's just like, it just hurts me, cuts me deep. But it's a year game. You've just got to accept when to move on. Otherwise, it could be very easy to be left with completely valueless players. But I guess the hope was really that he would have got traded around the draft, and now it's very tricky to see a path to him really being incredible because everything's playing out. And I know that you had a conversation where if you draft Trey Lance, you want to do it on a 2-quarterback team and really play the, what do you win when you win kind of scenario on it. But I just haven't found myself clicking draft on him yet.
I actually drafted him the other day, and it was on a 3-quarterback team, but it was where I completely punted quarterback 2 and 3. So look, I mean, I'm just letting the people know about the cheat codes over here. Nico's a cheat code, man. The big one's Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, get him in the 7th. Come on.
Yeah, I've got plenty of Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I plan on keeping it that way for a little while yet until the hype kind of gets out of control. So we're at a 2-4-6-1 current build. It's kind of area of the draft where there are tight ends around. There's a little queue of them. Phil Orman at the top with Irv Smith, Dawson Knox, Taysom Hill, Gerald Everett, and then, of course, you scroll a little further. We've got John Mechie and CJ Stroud if we wanted to build out that Texans stack. We don't have anything coming back. I believe Texans.
What other quarterbacks are there?
So Garoppolo, we've got Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder, and of course,
I'm tempted to go Singletary here. Get a 5th running back we feel pretty good about. Jalen Warren was gone. He's another guy I was eyeing. Let's push it with Stroud. Let's push it. We don't necessarily need him.
Well, that's it. We've got the outs to Desmond Ridder. There's also, perhaps it's a little dangerous, but the likes of Will Levis and Ryan Tannehill, who you can see here on the Spike Week day, play the Texans, who we've already got exposure to, the Seahawks, and then the Texans. So that would be something that, if we wanted to get a little weird with that third quarterback, it's not particularly pretty.
It's pretty weird. You can't backdoor stack it, which is what I don't like about it.
Well, unless you want to go down the route of looking for Westbrook Akine, it's
Kyle Phillips. Yeah. Get our PPR with Kyle Phillips.
Yeah, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? I mean,
yeah. Talk about a dead roster spot.
Played less than 100 snaps last year, I think, something very small like that. So I think the Titans are just a tricky one to kind of guess because it feels in the realm of possibilities that Will Levis doesn't play at all, but also they have quite an early bye, and their early schedule, they could be looking at 1-5 by the time they play the Ravens in London, and they've got a bye week, and perhaps then Will Levis is the guy who gets to start. They play the Falcons at home coming off that bye, and that could be a week where it's like, well, that's a lot easier than the games which we've opened the season, but I don't know. It's not a guy who I will be drafting a huge amount of, but yeah, if you want to tell yourself a story about playing as the season gets deeper, perhaps it's there. We've got Fantasy Football Garage in the comments as he has so much Levis exposure in big boards. And we've got Kyle
CJ Stroud went. That's a
bummer. Okay, so we're back around. We could build out we don't need a quarterback with John Mechie, or in terms of tight ends, we've got Michael Mayer there, Juwan Johnson, Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, let's do Mayer. Mayer's he's of good value too, right? Or not that
good. And I like that pairing him with Mark Andrews, because the idea being, we're going to really rely on Mark Andrews for many of those weeks. But I think Michael Mayer is one of those names that he could be very good. And yeah, it's.
I like it. Yeah, I like it.
Did you feel any worse about Michael Mayer after he kind of slipped out of the first round? Because it felt like for months we were seeing him sort of round about the 15th pick in every mock draft. And then on the night he slides down, and then we see him going into the second round, and he's actually tight end 3 overall. Did that make you reevaluate anything with him? Or did you just feel like, okay, well, actually the landing spot's really nice and this could be great?
What made me feel worse about Mayer is that he didn't really have a great combine. He wasn't like really unathletic, but he wasn't super athletic. And we've seen most of these guys who are awesome. They are crazy athletic. And again, it's because like you have to be able to do like 2 things that should be incompatible. Playing inline, blocking dudes, and running routes like a wide receiver helps if you're an insane athlete like George Kittle or Gronk, Travis Kelce, these guys. But Zach Ertz was not a very good athlete, and Mark Andrews is not a great athlete. So I don't think it's like a huge issue. And then both those guys were not first-round picks. Mark Andrews was a third-round pick. What was Ertz? I think he was second-round pick.
I thought it was maybe a 4th-round pick, but I might be wrong. I might be wrong on that one. Okay, so, yeah, we've got a team here on the 11th pick who've just taken their 5th quarterback. So, yeah, definitely.
You got to watch out, man. I'm telling you.
Once you've got Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, I mean, you have to come back and get Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, and Jimmy Garoppolo.
You got to do it. Is he going to do it again?
I mean, there's bully QB, and then there's whatever this is. But hey, it's 2023. The world's in a difficult place. I'm not going to tell people how to spend their money.
Yeah, it's $10. The guy's having fun.
Michael, who's one pick behind him, probably isn't enjoying it though.
And then there goes Ritter. Yeah, I think we're at this point. I think we're just two. I think we're two.
Yeah, in terms of, let me pull up
That Pickett breakout. Come on, Kenny.
I mean, he has to have some level of positive touchdown regression this year. It's just, it would be insane for him not to. But in terms of quarterbacks, yeah, it's Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Baker Mayfield, and then the Titans for that kind of weird thing. So in terms of players that we've got here, we haven't touched a wide receiver in a while. We've got
what about wide receiver?
Curtis Samuel, Josh Downs, Wandale Robinson, Claypool, which gives a bit of week 17, Richie James, Tyquan Thornton.
I don't like any of these guys. Shakir's okay.
Shakir, let's go Shakir. I like that. I like betting on the Bills for those kind of big end of season games. So let's grab him. But yeah,
did Tyquan Thornton go?
Tyquan was there. I did say I know you've got a soft spot for those guys who are on your roster.
Yeah, pretty much every. I don't think I'm fading any of them. It's weird. It's weird.
I mean, I can't blame you for that. I think I won a fantasy football league once where Curtis Samuel led me to the title, and I've got a knockoff jersey from China of Curtis Samuel on the Panthers. So if somebody won you $2 million, I feel like I'd probably be buying up merchandise left, right, and center. I'd be on pristine auction every day.
Honestly, what it is that I just am like so much. So like Chris Godwin, I wasn't really that into. And then I heard, just a couple arguments of like, well, you got to consider this and, his ability to earn targets. Second year coming off the injury, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm in. And I'm usually like much more hard. I don't change my mind that easily a lot. So I've noticed that I change my mind more easily when it's one of the guys who was on that team.
So got a question from Rich in the chat. Do you think that Shakir could be wide receiver 2 in Buffalo?
Probably not, but you do get to bet on a wide receiver over a rookie tight end in terms of who's out there running routes. And I think that Shakir's ADP has been held down by Dalton Kincaid. And I thought Shakir looked pretty good last year. I think he's interesting. So it's not, I don't think, so much of bet against like Gabe Davis. I don't think Shakir's going to like play on the outside. Gabe Davis has this crazy high ADOT. He does something for their offense that I think is important and that they like, and maybe he's better at it without the high ankle sprain this year. But I think it's more about, this is a team that runs a lot of 4 wide receiver sets. It's an incredible quarterback. They're aggressive, and Shakir could be part of that action. And maybe the Kincaid stuff's a little overblown.
Yeah, I found it hard to click on Kincaid. I think ever since Cole Beasley left, we're trying to find that person who we can just push into the Cole Beasley role and automatically assign them over 100 targets a year. And reality feels like perhaps we've just moved on with how they're going to play, and they're quite all right with that. I think Gabe Davis, I like this year. Like you said, the high ankle sprain, that's no easy injury to play through, and we've seen it affect a lot of players. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be talked about enough that was a good reason to hold him back last year. It just seems like a lot of people victory lapping, going, "Oh, I told you, Draft Bros, but he was going too high." So back on here. Tyquan Thornton goes
sniped
right
on both sides of the board.
So we've got, I mean, how are you feeling about running back? We're at 2,572. I'm kind of fine.
What's available?
Leonard Fournette, Cordell Patterson, Juice.
What about Gus?
Evans. You don't have to threaten me with a good time when it comes to Gus. So that little playoff correlation with Gus Bus. I do think that we're going to see a lot more work for J.K. Dobbins this year. I think there was times last year where John Harbaugh talked about how he didn't like how the game had gone away from J.K. Dobbins and Greg Roman had given more touches to him. But J.K. Dobbins is somebody that the Ravens have used around the goal line plenty. And if he pops up in the playoffs with a 2-touchdown game, and then he's got 40 yards on 10 carries for the rest of the game, that's still a big difference-making score. And I think he's possibly going a little later than he should be doing, particularly when you look at the kind of running backs who are down here, like Cordell Patterson, who's 32 years old, Juice Vaughn, free agents. So
we've also made a big bet on the Ravens. I mean, even though we only have Mark Andrews, like that's our 3rd-round pick. We've made a big bet that they're going to be scoring points, moving the ball. So yeah, get in on the fun.
So we've got Michael saying that he was struggling with Calvin Ridley being ranked so highly, but hearing Davante Adams raving about earlier this week, you make more of an effort to draft him. We've got a question for Fantasy Football Garage. Do you guys think Tolbert could be a useful pass catcher for Dallas this season? I mean, last year he got steamed up to like 110th in ADP on Underdog at one point.
I don't know. I mean, I think Cooks can still play.
Yeah.
And Gallup does his Gallup stuff. You know, he just like runs all. They're so uncreative with him. He just runs out of the X like every time. So I don't really see what Tolbert needs an injury, I think, to really get on the field.
Definitely. I think it's a tricky path, and perhaps, you know, the Cowboys kind of told us a lot about what they thought about him with how little they played him. We're almost back up here. Wide receiver, it's getting pretty miserable. We've got Devontae Parker, who'd give us a little correlation on week 16, 17. Tim Patrick, who seems to be going a little bit lower than I expected him to this offseason. Tank Dell, who build out a bit more of that non-quarterback stack. Do you want to go wide receiver? We're at a 2.672 at the minute.
Yeah. I think Tank Dell or Woods, I guess. I mean, Woods is not someone we probably need. We probably want the swing with Tank Dell later, right?
Yeah, that's where I lean with that one. I think Robert Woods can be CJ Stroud's best friend, but I just don't think he's, you know,
for how long?
Yeah, you kind of look at most of his stats and it's like just really going off the cliff edge in a lot of ways. And perhaps part of that is because the Titans were terrible last year, but it doesn't feel overly great. So just looking at these teams. So our friend at the 11 pick with the 5.472 has his running back 3 is Leonard Fournette, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is running back 4. How are you feeling about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Do you think the dream's just completely over for him in Kansas?
So I took a bunch of him in the big board where, you know, they hadn't signed McKinnon yet. And I'm like, I mean, as long as McKinnon's not there, like, he's going to play. And then obviously, you know, McKinnon could come back, but he's completely free. And it was so early that I'm like, a lot of these picks are going to be zeros, you know? So I might as well just mix them in now. And maybe like I'll hit on some huge closing line value if McKinnon doesn't get signed and then he'll draft someone. That didn't happen. And now I'm like, I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I got all the CH I need for the whole offseason. If he hits, maybe I bank the big board. But I don't think I think it's probably pretty much over for him.
Yeah, so we got 2 picks left. We're on a 2.682. At quarterback, it's pretty much only Will Levis and then a bunch of backups.
We're a 2 quarterback build for sure here.
Yeah, there's nobody that I'd really want on the team. Running back, there's a few kind of interesting names, you know, well, semi-interesting, I should say. Deion Jackson's somebody who I find interesting. He seems to have dropped down a bit, but, like, you know, he had usable weeks last year, but I haven't drafted him anywhere. Mac Hollins had a good season with the Raiders, and now he's kind of over in Atlanta. Anybody standing out for you, Pat? I mean, at tight end, we're set with 2.
Well, what is it tight end? Because when there's nothing else, sometimes I'll tack on a third.
I quite like Noah Fant, and we'd get a nice little correlation for that week 17 thing with Pickett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Deontay Johnson. Do you want to go Fant?
Or I'm good with Fant.
Jelani Woods.
I also don't mind Cedric Tillman at wide receiver.
Okay, well, let's go with Fant. I really like Fant. I've had him on some teams that have done well, and we'll throw Tillman in the queue, see if he comes back for our last pick. So 2.683, probably heading towards a 2.693. That's kind of a pretty similar build to what I found myself on a lot of times, normally with a quarterback slightly earlier than Tua. How many, if you had to put a percentage on it, how often do you think you're drafting 3 quarterback teams compared with 2 quarterback teams at the moment?
I think it's almost like 3-1, 2-3 at this point. Like I'm doing 2 quarterback like 3 times as often as 3 quarterback. And I'm actually wondering, like, maybe if I should be doing more 3 quarterback than I am, because it's always tough for me to place the line of like what is a, you know, when do you do the 3 quarterback build? Definitely like Herbert or earlier, it's 2, but I don't know. You could talk me into, and I guess Lawrence is going early enough where you really should do just 2, and then
Yeah.
Watson should probably be just 2. But does Dak have to be 2, or could you go 3? Because I think you could go 3 if you wanted.
I think with Dak, like I'm kind of in the mindset that if I'm picking a quarterback there, it needs to be a double tap, and I need to be getting my second quarterback pretty quick after that. Otherwise, yeah, I'd be looking for a third, but it's just so much draft to draft, isn't it? Like my preference is always 2 quarterbacks. I'm big listener to Sean Siegel of Rotoviz and how much he prescribes that kind of idea of 2 quarterbacks in a window. But over on DraftKings, I don't mind leaning towards 3 quarterback builds at times. I mean, last year, a huge chunk of my teams that went to the playoffs were 2 quarterback teams rather than 3, but then having almost 30% exposure to Trey Lance, remember a lot of them floundered pretty quickly once they were in the playoffs. So we're coming up on our last pick here. Cedric Tillman did go. We've got Marvin Jones, Quez Watkins, Kellen Wilson, Xavier Hutchinson. We could scroll down and find someone from the Dolphins or the Steelers, perhaps, who's going a bit undrafted. There's guys like Devin Duvernay or Nelson Aguilar. Russell Gage further down. Tutu Atwell.
We're not on the clock, right? Someone else?
No, yeah, almost. Nick Westbrook-Akine for that kind of Tennessee correlation if we were feeling really sick.
No.
Tyler Scott.
Tutu, I don't mind. I don't mind Tutu Atwell.
Okay. Starring Tyler
Scott. Give us any kind of
Atlanta in week 17. But yeah, it's pretty grim, really. We'll go with Tutu Atwell, and that'll round us out. So let me pull up the team. We had quarterback. We've got Tua. We've got that nice double stack with Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, the correlation with Mark Andrews, Jahmyr Gibbs, Drake London, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Deontay Johnson, Tua, Samaje Perine, Rashad Penny, Elijah Mitchell, Nico Collins, Kenny Pickett, Devin Singletary, Michael Mayer, Khalil Shakir, Gus Edwards, Nathaniel Dell, Noah Fant, and Tutu Atwell. How do you feel about that team, Pat? Is this a $1 million team?
It could be. I mean, we've got 2 big game stacks, right? Tua.
Yeah.
I mean, big game stacks here.
Yeah.
And what I like about it, right? Like, okay, are all these guys going to go off, on the Dolphins and the Ravens at the same time? Like, definitely not. But we have this advance rate thing going a little bit with Gus Edwards and Andrews, where if the Ravens are really good, like those guys, there could be a lot of touchdowns to go around. They could help us get there in the first place. And then, yeah, Tua and Tyreek and Waddle, you basically have the whole Dolphins passing offense, so they just need to go off. Andrews is the guy coming back, not Gus, probably. And then I like this other secondary game stack that we have. Jackson Smith-Njigba and Fant and Deontay, man, that could be fun. What if the Steelers and the Seahawks getting a little shootout? They go counter to the narrative there, counter to the ideologies, and actually pass.
I mean, nobody was expecting the Seahawks and the Lions to become the huge game that it was the year that Liam won, so it definitely could happen. In terms of the other teams in here, we've got idiosyncrasy, the first pick overall here. Justin Jefferson started with Josh Allen and then Tony Pollard. Got Alexander Mattison, who's been creeping up those draft boards here, 2,683. Took that little Ram stack that we talked about a little, and then rounded it out with Hayden Hurst. So a nice tight end room with Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee. How do you feel about those kind of tight end rooms where you just land on something where it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to have to put 3 together. These aren't particularly 3 players anyone's desperate to draft, but there's a good chance those are going to be 3 decent tight ends who will give you okay weeks. Or do you feel like that's not something you want a lot of?
I tend to like in these big tournaments, I tend to want to be overweight in elite tight end, but there's only so many elite tight ends, and you can't possibly, it would be silly to make your whole portfolio elite tight end team. So I think you want to have other options in your back pocket, and punting tight end entirely is totally viable. I think it's totally viable. So, that's what you were talking about, like 4 tight ends before with 20 rounds on DraftKings. Like, I think it's kind of interesting. Like you can, getting a tight end who happens to go off in week 15, and then you happen to have him, but you also happen to have a guy who goes off later, and those two aren't together all that often, just because there's most people are only taking 2 cracks at the late tight ends, maybe, or maybe just 1 or whatever, and you took 4. That could be kind of interesting, and I don't think we figure out these playoff formats yet. Like, there's still a lot to think through, and there's like just that thing of it is hard to get to week 17, and tight end is a highly variant position. So I like to think about tight end a lot. I think there's it's not a high scoring position, but it's so variant that there's probably some edges, and so maybe scooping these late guys is a big one.
So many of these playoffs tournaments are completely different, but it's really difficult, and everything changes so much year to year. It's really tricky. Just a quick look at James's team here at the 12, 11, 10, 9th spot. We had Austin Eckler and Jonathan Taylor for a dual RB start before really hammering wide receiver with like 6 in a row. AJ Dillon and then 3 quarterbacks in a row. I really like this build here, and then rounding it out with complete punt tight end and taking him with his last 3 picks. I think that's the kind of build which I'm very happy to do on DraftKings, where you've got those 20 spots. I think it's really nice, and
that's a nice build. And did he? Yeah. So you got Jaden Reed with Jordan Love. What kind of other correlation stuff do you got? Trey McBride and Kyler Murray, looks like.
So Jordan Love, Daniel Jones, Kyler Murray. So he had Marquise Brown with Kyler Murray. So if Kyler Murray does come back, we've got Darius Slayton with Daniel Jones. Yeah, it's very nice. Nice little bits of stack there. So we'll round it out there, Pat. Before we go, do you want to remind people what they should be checking out on Legendary Upside at the minute, the offers you've got going?
Yeah, so I have downloadable and uploadable to Underdog. I've got rankings there. I am tinkering around. I might be able to do DraftKings rankings as well, I think, without too much more work. That's not official, but it's looking more and more likely that I might be able to do that. And then, I'm working on some articles. I just had the tight ends article out recently. I had an article recently where I broke down the team that I drafted, kind of talking about sort of stacking without the quarterback, those types of concepts, and sort of building in additional week 17 correlation as you go. Like, for example, in this draft, this is one of the things I wrote about in an article recently. Like, we took Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then we broke a tie to the Steelers guys, right? We never got Geno Smith, but it ended up really helping us out when we got sniped later and we were able to fall back on a Kenny Pickett stack. That ended up being, and then we ended up kind of game stacking that game with Noah Fant and stuff. You kind of, if you just like break ties as you go and don't reach, you end up having more flexibility, not less, in the draft. I think sometimes people get worried that by trying to build in week 17 correlation, they're going to sacrifice other elements of their draft. And the way I think about it is like, no, we're not sacrificing anything. We're building it in. It's actually going to make it easier for us to build good teams, not harder. So I have an article up on the site about that. And you sign up right now. You can get $30 off at legendaryupside.com/early. Make sure you fill out, if you're on Underdog. If you're not on Underdog, you can use promo code LEGUP and get a deposit match up to $100. If you are, or if you have just signed up, you can get $50 credit by filling out a form on the site. It's right on the homepage, right at the top of the site under perks/Discord.
Cool. And before I let people get out of here, if you're not subscribed already, hit the subscribe button. We've got loads more best ball content coming up. June is going to be so much best ball content coming, strategy videos, loads more great guests. Rich is fully kicking off the Dynasty side at the minute. He's got Devi videos coming out this week. And we're just going to keep on rolling and keep on drafting all the way until the season kicks off. Pat, thanks for being on. Catch everyone again soon.